Hello, my name is Andrew Howell, Graduate Research Assistant in Weed Science at North Carolina State University under the direction of Dr. Rob Richardson. Today we'll be discussing unmanned aerial application systems for Christmas tree research and how these units may be implemented in other sorts of extension programs throughout the state of North Carolina. Unmanned aerial systems, commonly referred to as drones, are increasingly being utilized for mapping, insect management, weed management, and other sorts of agricultural operations that we commonly use or do in our day-to-day lives. So one of the common systems when we're thinking of mapping is using something like this. Oftentimes this is what people think of when you're talking about drones and their sorts of operations. In recent times, however, we've begun to see a shift into more specific use patterns for these units, something like this ag spray drone here. So here we are with our unmanned aerial spray system. Setup with one of these units is fairly simple. We simply open the arms, and this particular model uses a screw lock function to ensure that the arms are secure during flight. Once our arms are secure, our next objective is to get our battery set up so that we can get this thing in the air. Once our battery is secure, we go back to our remote control and we ensure that all the diagnostics that are on the remote are reading normal. Also important before every flight to ensure that propellers, rotors, arms, and other sorts of components on the UAS are safe for operation. We do this by ensuring that there's no nicks or damages to any of these components. Now that we've ensured that the unit is safe to fly and that we're prepared for our agricultural operations or weed management strategies with one of these units, it's time to plug in our battery. To do this, on this particular model, we simply just plug in the terminals. And we again inspect that all of the communication and normal functionality that is sent to the controller is normal. Now that we've determined that our unit and its functionality are ready to conduct its operation, we prime our system. We do this by allowing the pump to cycle through the liquid material that we're going to be applying. We make sure, just like on any other sort of spray system, that our nozzle are not clogged, that our spray pattern and that the nozzle angle is representative of what we're going to be spraying on and for. After inspecting our nozzles for any sorts of clogs or other damage that could occur to our pump or line system, just as we would inspect any other sprayer, our system is now ready for flight. We can begin our mission and we can expect that our operations are going to be normal and sufficient for weed control scenario. Now this is an aerial application of pesticides, and as public operators we have to do our due diligence on how we can incorporate these systems into our management strategies and how we can advise others on how we can utilize these in our target markets. Now with a system like this, it does require a series of regulatory constraints and confines, and of course this is to ensure that these operations are safe and secure. So of the constraints that we're going to be looking at. Oftentimes with a small drone system for imaging, we're flying under what's known as a Part 107. Now with this Part 107, one of the limitations that we have is that we cannot dispense any sort of product other than water aerial. So with a system like this, it requires a number of things. We need not only our aerial applicator's license, but there's also some FAA requirements. So we have to file a series of exemptions through FAA, especially as public applicators, to ensure that our operations are legal and within the constraints of the statute. So concerning operational constraints, we have a number of things to think about that we may not traditionally run into with a backpack or a boom style sprayer on a tractor or other sort of motorized vehicle. So wind is obviously something that we have to think about, especially when we're applying pesticides. But there's other sorts of factors that go along once you take an application like this to the air. Even flying at 10 or 15 feet, the wind speeds can be quite prohibitive of the applications that are listed on a chemical label. So that's something that we have to think about as we begin to research and utilize these systems in our common management strategies. Another sort of confine that we could deal with is obstacles. Behind us we have a power line, and how might something like that limit our operations as we go to do our flights? In common weed management scenarios in Christmas trees, we normally expect that backpack sprayers are going to be using between 16 and 20 gallons per acre total spray volume for controlling and targeting the weed species that are within the road middles. Now with this spray drone or unmanned aerial spray unit that we have here, it only has a 2.5 gallon tank. So we have to think about what is the most efficient strategy that we can increase our battery life, ensure that we don't have to bring this unit back home every 5 or 6 times within a 1 acre field scenario. We set up a study where we had different spray cards set out, and we're looking at various application heights and how might some of those confines work into that with our wind and other sorts of obstacles that could be within our field scenario. We're also looking at the application volumes that we're needing to ensure that our deposition of our spray is going to be sufficient for weed management within the rows around these Christmas trees. And this is true for many other agricultural operations. Christmas trees are just one commodity that we're looking at here. So we had a series of water sensitive papers that we set out, and the idea is how does that spray deposition, how is that really influenced not only by tree shedding, so how does the crop canopy affect the deposition that we're getting based on the amount of liquid that we're applying to the landscape. But how do other sorts of confines and factors work in, like flying speed and height of application where the product is actually released? How does that influence the deposition onto our target weed species? In this particular study, we evaluated 4 different spray volumes: 16, 8, 4, and 2 gallons per acre. Now we kept our nozzle selection the same across the board for all these GPAs, but the idea was we would alter our flight speeds and we would change our altitude to change and modify our gallons per acre, our total spray volume that's applied in this weed management scenario. So based on preliminary results, we've seen very positive deposition in all of the gallons per acre that we've tested, especially at the 10-foot height flying altitude that we were looking at. So 2 and 4 and 8 gallons per acre as a preliminary data do provide sufficient deposition across our weedy middles that we were looking at. Based on these deposition results that we've received, it's time for us to move from deposition rates and look at how we can incorporate common chemical strategies for weed management and utilize and test these various gallons per acre and how that's going to be effective for our weed management and other sorts of control tactics in a system like this. Now, while a unit like this shows a lot of promise for weed management scenarios in Christmas trees and in many other agricultural markets as well, these sorts of systems still are in infancy, so the technology is continuing to develop. However, we as researchers, and especially at an extension, we have to ensure that these units can be moved over to our target markets, to our growers, and we can ensure that these units are going to be utilized in a safe and responsible manner for day-to-day operations. It's our goal at NC State, through research and extension, that we can disseminate the information through these research strategies and programs and projects that we've talked about today, and that we can provide growers with information that ensures profitable and sustainable operations for their day-to-day management.